Hi, welcome to today's video. We're going to talk about Donald Trump's speech making. I think it's an area where we can learn a lot. Trump has shattered many norms with the presidency, how he interacts with other branches of government, campaigning, and certainly that's true for his speech making. So I think we should highlight a few aspects of his speech making that may or may not work for him. I'm never quite sure. But I think in some cases they probably won't work for us, and it's good to note them and learn from them. So in the past week, he gave two very high profile speeches. One was at Charlie Kirk's funeral, and the other was before the United Nations. So let's talk about what we can learn. The first involves the length of the presentation. Let's keep in mind the average adult attention span is roughly 18 minutes. We've always preached over the years, don't overstay your welcome, leave an audience wanting more. In his first presentation, it was a ceremonial address. It was at a funeral. This is epdictic speaking in classical terms. Usually these are fairly short orations, fairly short speeches, 10 minutes approximately. So he went closer to 45. So you run a risk, especially when you're later in the day and people have been sitting for hours. You're running the risk that people are already disengaged before you start. But they tire, and by the time you start speaking, they're just tired of sitting there. There's a risk in overstaying your welcome, going too long. Same thing at the United Nations. I think the address was supposed to be roughly 15 minutes. It was just shy of an hour. Once again, people start to tune out. They're not sure where it's all going. When you're speaking that long, one tends to ramble and lose focus. And I think that's what we saw in the United Nations presentation. And that's my second point. You want to stay true to a theme, true to the demands of the occasion, the expectation of the audience. So if we take the first, the Charlie Kirk funeral, certainly in that kind of presentation, you want to honor the deceased. And I think for most of the presentation, Trump did that. He just had to segue into different aspects of his agenda. From talking about Charlie and Mega, he went to Make America Healthy Again. From Make America Healthy Again, he talked about the huge announcement that was coming because we've found an answer to autism. Talking about Charlie Kirk and his, coming from Chicago. From Chicago, he went into crime. From crime, he went into DC and was saying that things are green again in DC and 1,500 career criminals have been taken off the streets. And once again, you can walk down those streets without any fear. So there were two, at least, very large tangents that give people a chance to disengage, tune out, and it just takes away from your theme. You try to get in there with your comments, stay focused on your theme, and then get out of there and leave an audience wanting a little bit more. And you try to get your audience more favorably disposed to you. Um, if we talk about the United Nations presentation, and that's one where I'm not sure the theme was particular clear. What exactly was the purpose of the presentation? I think in the Kirk presentation, it was clear. He was honoring Charlie Kirk and related him to the mega movement, etc. Well into Trump's United Nations presentations, he said this. This was in one paragraph. I've come here today to offer the hand of American leadership and friendship to any nation in this assembly that is willing to join us in forging a safer, more prosperous world. That's a pretty solid thesis. That came, over 20 minutes into the presentation. Instead, he started talking about the teleprompter and the person that was operating the teleprompter was going to be in trouble. And he started by patting himself on the back. 6 years have passed since I stood in this grand hall and addressed the world that was prosperous and at peace in my first term. Since that day, the guns of war have shattered the peace I forged on 2 continents. An era of calm and stability gave way to one of the great crises of our time. Was that COVID? Not sure. And here in the United States, 4 years of weakness, lawlessness, and radicalism under the last administration delivered our nation into a repeated set of disasters. 1 year ago, our country was in deep trouble. Just 8 months into my administration, we are the hottest country in the world, and there is no other country even close. So we're not quite sure where this presentation is going to go. All we know is he's in the hottest country of the world, overseeing the hottest country, and you're not. It's much like Chevy Chase back in the old Saturday Night Live days when he would say, I'm Chevy Chase, and you're not. And I think right away it just puts people on a defensive. They see there's a certain arrogance there that causes folks not to want to feel close to that presenter. And he continued in that vein by saying such things as, I'm really good at this stuff, and your countries are going to hell. So that starts to wear on an audience. And I think when we don't, that's why we even use some things, light touches of humor. When you say, well, does humor help us become more persuasive? Maybe not. But what it does is it displays our humanness, and it shows our vulnerability, and it increases the likelihood that people can connect with us, and it opens up their brain. We pass the first brain test, and people become more open to our message. If we start off just patting ourselves on the back and pretty much saying, why does this organization even exist? You don't live up to the potential. Meanwhile, I've solved 7 wars, and I should be getting everyone's saying I should be getting a Nobel Prize for each of those wars, solving these conflicts. Well, it turns people off. And I think that's why there's a certain amount of cynicism. I know I experienced that in a recent trip to Europe. I had just gotten off the plane in Europe being picked up. My wife and I were being picked up with someone we had stayed with before in Italy. Before we even exchanged pleasantries, her first question was, what do you think of Trump? I was tired and I really didn't want to get into that kind of discussion. But I think when we see these high profile presentations, you can understand why people are a little bit uncertain as to where Trump may be coming from, in situations that usually demand a little more formality, a little more civility, etc. So beside trying to create these positive connections, trying to stay true to messaging, it's important that you support claims with evidence. So what are these 7 conflicts that you solved? Give us a little more on this huge announcement that's going to be one of the biggest ever, especially in medicine. Who exactly is clamoring that you win a Nobel Prize? There are so many instances where the hyperbole, the overstatements are so grand, people almost dismiss them because of the lack of evidence. But I think for all of us, we need to remember, when we make claims, back it up with statistics, examples, credible statistics and example, recent statistics and example. I mean, even if we think of this autism discussion, and I'm not going to go into all of that, but the indication was this was new and groundbreaking. None of the research that they alluded to that shows some correlation perhaps between autism and taking Tylenol is new. And the largest research, done out of Sweden was done years ago and really showed no causation at all. So we need to make sure when we are making claims, we support it with evidence. So summarizing, Try to stay true to time frames. Don't overstay your welcome. Stay consistent with messaging. Have a clear thesis. Carry it through. Try to avoid going off on tangents that give reasons for people to disengage. Try to connect with the audience and create positive connections. At times, you sincerely compliment an audience. Make them feel good about themselves and make them feel good about listening to you and wanting to hear what you have to say. And when we make claims, especially some of these very broad and large claims, make sure that we have evidence to support. Those are some of the key takeaways that I wanted to share with you regarding Donald Trump's speech making, especially in relation to the two speeches he gave in the past week. I hope you enjoyed this YouTube channel, Professor R.J. Placone on communication excellence. Thank you so much.